We're moving on to our final section, Jamie, which is, well, we're past the halfway stage now in this amazing season, but we need to grade all the teams. And I'm sure the idea of school grades sends shivers down your spine.
Hey, Dave, I got all A's.
I'll bet you did. Who marked it?
No, absent.
Right, let's start at the bottom. Sheffield United, as we speak, are still at the bottom. So, it looks like there's a bit of a resurgence, but how would you mark them so far?
It can't be a great mark for anyone near the bottom, and I think the drop off from last season has been monumental. And I think they are one of the teams, and I think this affects Liverpool as well. I think certain teams will be affected more by no crowd being in there, and I think Sheffield United is certainly one of them. I used to love going there last season with the supporters and the energy and what it did for the team, and I think it has been a huge miss for them. So I think you'd have to give Sheffield United, considering where they were last season, you'd have to give them a D.
D. Right, okay.
You're not expecting that, Dave? No.
Well, I thought you might make some sort of suggestion that they had an amazing first season. This is probably more like par for them.
Yeah, but I'm going from last season for what they did. So what they did last season, they're probably never going to rectify it.
But they are bottom. You're right. West Brom then, just above them at the minute.
I actually think West Brom have done a lot worse. Really, I might go E for West Brom. And the reason I say that is because the club changed the manager, and the manager they brought in, Sam Allardyce, we know it won't be as easy on the eye. Slaven Bilic's teams will play probably a little bit more football, be a better watch. But when you bring a manager in like Sam Allardyce, it's to get results and get clean sheets. And it actually feels like it's got worse to me, really. Where, they're getting beat. It's not just the points they've got, it's the results. A lot of 4s and 5s, losing really heavily. And I get they're not a great team, but obviously you bring Sam in to make it, teams difficult. His team difficult to beat, and they're not difficult to beat either, really. So I think they've been really poor. And also, even though they've just come up, so people may think it's harsh, but West Brom are a team who you almost feel like a Premier League team as such in some ways. We've been quite there quite a lot over the years, and the club are used to sort of jumping straight back when they've been down the Championship. So I think it's been really poor, considering the change that the club made, really, and sort of the results since that change. It's actually got a lot worse.
All right, E for West Brom. What about Fulham? Now, after 3 games, remember, I think you were giving them an F, weren't you? Or a U. But since then, there has been a bit of an upturn, and then again gone on this awful run without a win. So how are you going to mark Fulham, who, as we speak, are 8 points from safety?
I think Fulham have done okay. I really do. I think since they've came up, I don't mind watching them play. When I'm you watch a Fulham game, they're a decent watch. Really, it was always going to be tough, certainly with a manager who hasn't got much experience. I'm talking about sort of Chris Wilder and Sam Allardyce as well. And they've got great experience as managers, whereas, Scott Parker's early in jobs. And I think Fulham, I'm going to give a C, really. I expected them to maybe be bottom, Fulham. And I think actually watching them, yes, there's a big points gap between them and the next team we're going to look at, Burnley. But I think they've been very competitive in games. And that's why I'm so down maybe on West Brom, is that they haven't been competitive in games. They're losing so easily. Whereas Fulham have had a lot of draws or losing games by the odd goal, really. So I think they should, feel like they're doing okay, Fulham. I'd always expect them to be in the bottom 3, the top of that mini league, if you like. And they'd just be hoping we can turn some of those draws into wins. But it was always going to be tough. Lots of players coming in that sort of the last day of the window. Bit of chaos in the transfer window. And they're doing as well as I could have expected them to.
Burnley tracking just about a point a game. How do they mark?
I would say C+, B-, really. Now, they are a Premier League team, you'll say. A couple of years ago, they were 7th and they have dropped down a lot. But I actually look at Sean Dyche and what they do in the transfer market in terms of the money they spend is virtually nothing compared to a lot of other teams, certainly teams who are below them. And just year after year, they'll stay up. and you never believe you'll go down. And I think people in the Premier League, I think people at Burnley never believe they'll go down. It'll happen one day, but I think it'll happen when Sean Dyche leaves the club. I can't see Sean Dyche going down with Burnley. I know that happened, I think, in his first season, but that he came back, dusted themselves down, as I said, and they have a method, a way of playing that, as I said, is not pretty on the eye, but it'll always do enough to keep, Burnley in the Premier League. But how they do it with the revenue and the money they spend in the transfer market, I think is testimony to the job that Sean Dyche does year in, year out.
C plus B minus for Burnley. Newcastle, we spoke a lot about on Monday Night Football a couple of weeks ago, so just need a sentence on them. Newcastle's mark.
I would say D. People may say the 16th, where do you expect them to be? But it's Newcastle, and that's not just the team, it's the whole club, it's Mike Ashley, everything about them. Newcastle shouldn't really be in these positions, I don't feel, with the fighting relegation every year. Is the squad that much better than teams in the bottom three? I don't think it particularly is, but they do have a striker who I think is a really good Premier League striker, and he's going to keep them up this season with his goals. So you'd always think they'll have enough to stay up. But the whole situation at Newcastle, really watching them play, it's never really a great watch either, really. So I'd say D+.
D+. What about Brighton? 10 points from the last 4 has changed the picture quite a lot for them.
Yeah, I like Brighton. I'm a huge fan of the manager, the way they play. They really excite me watching them. Every time I see them near the bottom, I always think they're in a false position. But as we all know, they can't finish. But they're a really good watch. They really are. And I'd actually give Brighton a B, a B minus. The position they find themselves in. I don't think they're ever going to make themselves a top 10 club. But if they can find themselves maybe away from the relegation zone, with 4 or 5 games to go over the season, I think they'll have done really well. And I think the change in sort of performance and certainly the way they go about it, from the last manager, Chris Hughton, there's a lot of criticism that they changed Chris Hughton. And I had no problem. I thought he was doing really well to keep Brighton in the Premier League. But they play an open brand of football that people say at times maybe you can't play near the bottom. But they've done it and done it really well. So what was it to give them?
You gave them B minus. I think that's probably fair.
Yeah, I think they've done really well.
There was a big win for Wolves against Arsenal this week. Take them to 26 points from their 22 games. So what are you going to grade them? I've had a tough time without Jimenez.
Yeah, I think it's been poor from Wolves this season. I don't think they've been great to watch. They are a team who like to sit back and build themselves into games, but it just feels like there's been a big drop-off this season. Really, the manager never panics, the club don't, but there's been a change of system as well. I'm not quite sure it suits them a back four, but yeah, this was the season I thought Wolves might challenge for the top 4 because there was no European football. They've been there or thereabouts in the last 4, sort of 2 or 3 years under the new manager. So I'm going to go for a C. I was expecting a little bit more from Wolves this season, I must say that.
C for Wolves. Crystal Palace just above them, 29 points. Roy Hodgson's at it again.
Yeah, and it's similar to some other clubs where, probably similar to Burnley in some ways, where you never feel Crystal Palace will go down with Roy Hodgson in charge, but you never feel like they're going to massively excite you or do anything out of the ordinary. But they're there or thereabouts, and I think clubs like that are always trying to get better and improve, and why shouldn't they? But I think sometimes clubs should also just be happy that they're in the Premier League year in, year out, and they're not involved in a relegation fight. And I think Crystal Palace are in that sort of, well, they're almost a guarantee of not being in the top 10, but they won't be in a relegation fight. You know exactly where they're going to be towards the end of the season. And I don't think that'll change under Roy Hodgson. I think every season Crystal Palace are in the Premier League, they should be really pleased and not in a relegation fight. So, again, I would give Crystal Palace a B minus.
Poor old Southampton, who were flying at one stage, top of the league, weren't they? And now they've lost 4 of the bounce. And of course, got done 9 at Old Trafford.
No, similar again to Crystal Palace. I mean, they've got a horrific injury list at this moment. I mean, the 9-0 will get big headlines. But I think for Southampton, if they can make themselves a mid-table team, I think in the past, under Koeman and Pochettino, they've been a club who were getting into sort of Europa League positions, really. But they had some really top players then, whether that was through recruitment or coming through the club. They moved those on. And I don't think they're really attacking the transfer market maybe as much as they maybe have done in the past with other managers. And I think for Hasenhüttl in the position that he's in, and what he spends in the summer and the players they bring in, really. And as I said, the injury list he's had this season, I think they've done well, Southampton. I don't see them being involved and getting dragged down near the bottom. At times they've been near the top. So I think Southampton had a good season. So I'd say a B.
Leeds United, more points than the other two promoted clubs combined. 29 points from 21. Just sit below the top half. How are you going to grade them?
I'm going to go B+. And it's a funny one, Leeds. I think some people feel Leeds get too much appreciation. But I think sometimes we forget they're a promoted team. It's like that when I hear people criticise them or say Bielsa gets too much praise, well, maybe we do praise Bielsa, not too much, but more than other managers in his situation, because he's different. He's new to the league. He's got an interpreter. There's a bit more mystique maybe about him. Pep Guardiola adores him. Pochettino does. So there's going to be that much more attention on that type of manager, really. And I love watching them play. People talk about them being really poor defensively, but when you're a promoted team, it's very difficult to be very good going forward and very good defensively. And if you were that, you'd be top of the league. So, if you're asking me, would I rather a team be really good going forward and exciting to watch and poor defensively as a watch? Yeah, of course I would, rather than maybe watching, maybe West Brom near the bottom, really. So, you're not going to have both if you're a promoted team. So, as I said, I think they're doing fantastically well. And yes, they are a big club, Leeds, but they've been out the Premier League for an awful long time. And it's not the same as a West Brom coming back in the league for me, because for me, they still feel like a Premier League club. They've been there, the last few years. The setup behind the scenes will feel like the Premier League, whereas Leeds this is new to them. And no chance of them being involved in a relegation fight, and they'll be looking to sort of get into that top 10. And no, I think they're a brilliant watch, and they've had some really good results.
This is a hard one to do in a sentence, but Arsenal in 10th.
D. I just when you see Arsenal 10th, I know they haven't been great in the last few years, but I'm not sort of putting this all at Mikel Arteta's door. I think Mikel Arteta's done a really good job since he come in. Winning the FA Cup, beating Liverpool in the Community Shield as well. The run that they're on now, coming through that really tough period that they were in, so they're just getting going. Unfortunate, really, with what happened at Wolves, but there's definitely signs now that they're sort of moving forward. And I think Arsenal will be sort of top 8 by the time the season finishes. I do think there's something to see there. I love the younger players who've come in, really. So, but when you see Arsenal in 10th and you think of the run they were on, a while ago,
they would have been 7th had they beaten Wolves the other night. And it was a strange set of events, wasn't it, for them to lose that game?
Yeah, it was. But I couldn't just get that run out of my head that they were on. Yeah. I think they haven't recruited great, really. Partey's been out. So, I mean, they are tight to 7th. You've made me maybe change my mind slightly there, Dave, when you've said if they'd have won the other day, they'd have gone 7. I'm just looking at the table now. Maybe C-.
C-. Okay.
Or
still work to improve. We'll go C-. Aston Villa above them.
Yeah, I think the last result they've had really hurt them, the West Ham one. I really do, because if they'd have won that, they'd have been in 7th position. And I think they've been brilliant this season, Villa. I've loved watching them. They excite me. They look a really good team. They take the game to other top teams. They've been away to Manchester City and United. They've done really well in those games. Battered Liverpool 7-2. I think in Jack Grealish, we have one of the best players in the Premier League this season. And no, I think he's got a really good team there. I really do. And for me, it almost feels like they deserve to be higher than 9th from what I've seen this season. But I'm going to give Aston Villa a B+, because this is a team that was fighting relegation last season. I couldn't see how they were going to stay up. They stayed up, I think, in the last game of the season. And they've been one of the best teams I've seen this season in terms of the football they play. And as I said, it feels like they should be higher in some ways from what I've seen than 9th in the table.
Chelsea in 8th.
Chelsea, I would say a C. I mean, Frank was involved for most of that. Tuchel's come in now for a couple of games, but I mean, just looking at the fact that they topped the Champions League group as well, you should add in that. That was, they did really well, and that we had a spell, I think, where they went 17 or 18 games unbeaten as well. So we shouldn't forget that. But obviously they're on a really poor run of late, and that's put them in the position that they're in terms of the league. They've still got the FA Cup to go for as well, so there's still things for them to fight for. But new manager now. He's got 4 points out of 6. He's obviously a top manager, a great pedigree, really. So I'd expect them to really challenge for the top 4 positions between now and the end of the season, because I just think there's that many teams dropping points and no one can be really confident about where they're going to finish. So I think that could drag, Chelsea maybe, back into the mix of those positions as well.
Yeah, they're not far off it. What about Spurs? Just above them, and actually with the game in hand on Chelsea.
Yeah, I'd say B- for Spurs, really. I'd expect them to... I don't expect Tottenham to be in the top 4. I don't think the squad's good enough or the team's good enough to say that they're in the top 4 teams in the country, to be honest. I think watching them at times can be tough. They are a tough watch at different times. I think they rely heavily on Kane and Son. And I think, as we know now, with Harry Kane being out, or if Son was ever out, I think it'd really, really trouble them. Really. And I think if Jose gets this squad of players in the top 4, he'll have done a brilliant job. I really do believe that. But I do think they'll just miss out. I think they're in the cup. They're in a cup final. I think that's in April or May. They're still in the FA Cup. Obviously, still got the Europa League. They've had a lot of problems at the start of the season in how many games they were playing. So I would say I totally forgot. What did I give them, Dave?
You gave them a B-.
Okay, that's accurate.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think a B- is fair for Tottenham.
What about Everton?
For Everton, I would say B+ for Everton and Ancelotti. Their target at the start of the season would have been to get the top 4. Whether anyone else outside of the club thought that was realistic, most people would say no. But they are right in there in the running. At this moment, they're still in the cup, the FA Cup, big game midweek against Spurs at home. So if we'd have done that after that game, maybe it might have affected me, the letter that they got. But no, I think if Everton are challenging for top 4 positions, I think that's Everton having a really good season. And they've lost a few games at different times, games they'd be disappointed with, certainly at home. And that's the same for every team. But no, I'd say Everton's position at this moment, 6th in the table, I'd have to say B+.
Yeah, very good. West Ham United in 5th place. They're 2 points ahead of Everton. Everton have got 2 games in hand on them, but still, West Ham United in 5th when they, like Villa this time last year, were scrapping for their survival.
I'd have to go A- with West Ham. I would not have expected them to be there at all. Another team similar to Aston Villa fighting relegation last season. And to see the position that they're in, and I must say I'm delighted for David Moyes. I think David Moyes is a really good manager, Premier League manager. I think West Ham is a team similar to Everton, who are a team you'd normally, people outside of their clubs would expect them to be maybe challenging for. Same as Aston Villa. I always put those 3 teams together in a bunch, really. Teams who I always think should be challenging European positions, really, year in, year out. That's where they should be in a league. They should be top 8 teams. And if they do better than that, they've had a great season. But to go from where West Ham were last season and the position that they're in now, and I think David Moyes can do a similar job at West Ham than what he did at Everton. And that's why I linked them together. I think he can, if he could do what he did at Everton at West Ham, with it constantly challenging the top 6 or in the top 6, I think that's a brilliant job at West Ham. And the position they're in, I'm delighted for the manager. So A-, is that the first A?
West Ham United, top of the class so far with only the top 4 to go. Is anyone going to beat them? What about Liverpool?
Liverpool, I would give a C. And obviously there's been a big drop-off in the league last season. I get that. So people may say that should have been lower. But just looking at the league, they are still only 7 points off the top. And they have had a lot of injury problems. I know other teams have, and maybe they're sick of people talking about Liverpool. But it has been quite unprecedented, really, what Liverpool have had. Certainly in that one position at centre-back. They've had midfielders at centre-back. So I think to be 7 points off the top with the problems that they've had is... Did I say... I'll go C-, actually.
C-.
I'll go C-. Yeah. They are the champions, but they have had problems. Was I expecting to be a little bit closer to City? Maybe. I mean, the last two results at home have been really poor. They have been, the Brighton game and the Burnley game. That's what's really hurt Liverpool. And so we'll go C minus, only because I think it would have been D minus, but for I think the problems they've had injury wise and the plays they've had at different times, I think they've probably been hit with injuries more than any other team in the Premier League.
Leicester City, yet again, up there challenging with the very best. What do you make of them?
I would go A. I really would. I would go A. And let's not forget that they're in Europe as well, so it's not a case of a team who are not having got European, competition and they find it easy with 3 weeks or anything like that. Great team to watch. I think Brendan Rodgers is the best British manager out there. I really do. I think he's a top manager. And I think on the back of missing out last season, maybe people thought Leicester would just drop to that level, maybe where you look on the table where your Chelsea and Tottenham are, really where they're sort of 6th or 7th, but they've been consistently in the top. I wouldn't even say the top 4. They've always felt like they're in sort of in the top 3, really a lot of the time. So no, they've had a brilliant season. And listen, that's another team we've had injury problems at different times as well, certainly at the start of the season. So I'm going to go for A for Leicester.
A for Leicester. Top 2 then, Manchester United.
Manchester United, I'm going to go for A minus. Really, I think they find themselves in a great position. A position where Manchester United probably should be, or was it in and around the top 4 or in the top 4. At this moment, they're a lot closer to City and Liverpool. I think they've improved. I don't think they've improved massively. I think, obviously, as we know, with the points total, City and Liverpool have dropped off from where they were. And they would have got a higher mark, but I just think in the last couple of games, I just think they've lacked belief that they can win the league. And I'm looking at the numbers now. They're only 3 points behind Man City. And Man City going to Anfield at the weekend. And I just think Man United have got to believe and actually remember that they're Man United, one of the biggest clubs in the world. I don't think if Real Madrid were in this position in La Liga, they'd think they couldn't win the league, or they'd be excited, or Gary Neville will be having a party, or Casillas or someone will be having a party because Madrid were back second in the league on social media. So that's why. I'd go A minus with Man United.
A minus for Manchester United. All right. And what about Manchester City, our current Premier League leaders?
I would just go with an A. I wouldn't go A plus, because I don't think it's the City of old, or the City that we've seen, blitzing teams for the past couple of years. Maybe that's to be expected with everyone's like that. We're not having the season that we normally have, the pandemic, different things. So I would go an A. Really, because I still think at different times, certainly the start of the season, they had a few problems, really. And I think the only way you get A plus is if we were looking at City maybe from a couple of years ago, when they almost won every game and getting 100 points. I think the title winner this season is possibly going to get 80 odd points, which would be a total that would be going back sort of 10 or 15 years in some ways. So I'd give Man City an A.
So they and Leicester City are the school swats.
Yes.
In your eyes. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I think the only one I would dispute is Leicester City, probably just because they've lost, I think, more home games already this season than they have last. So I might give them a minus for that and say that's something they can improve on. Yeah,
but it's Leicester, isn't it, Dave? It's not one of the Giants.
But they've got such a good squad, haven't they? They're not going anywhere, Leicester City.
Yeah, but it's not as good a squad as the other top teams.
No, and Manchester City have fought their way to an A, haven't they? And now they look like they're going to take some shifting.
Unfortunately.
Jamie, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And just a little reminder that Liverpool-Manchester City is the Super 6 extra game this Sunday. So do get involved. Bye from us.